cold. I'm freezing tonight. It's freezing in here. I'm just also a lizard. Yeah, totally. Now I feel like I'm in Hogwarts. So I have a stupid anecdote to start with, which my partner Andy told me, and like I apologize for the lameness of not having perfect memory about it, but it's so good I wanted to start with it. He was telling me about an article he read that's about this lady who was training to be a nun, and she was like, yep, I'm going to go do this. And then at some point she decided she didn't want to be a nun after all, and she left the church and sort of started a secular life. And then later on, she got really obsessed in this like network of people who were like having these intense debates about Kurzweilian singularity. And so like specifically when we meet the technological singularity and we upload ourselves into the internet or the cloud or whatever the computing network is called at that stage, like, will that be a additive process? Will we like remain in our bodies and also go into the system, or will our bodies like have to be disposed of in that process? And she was like, oh, this is actually really funny because like this is the debate that everyone has about resurrection, right? Like everyone asks, oh, you know, like when Jesus comes back and like you bring up the worthy from the dead, is it going to be their bodies or is it just their souls that are raised up? And she's like really finding it entertaining because everybody having this debate about Kurzweilian singularity had no idea that they were having a debate that's already been going for 2,000 years. So if you need like the short version of my talk, that's it, you're done, you can go home. Okay, so let's, are you working? Yes, good, okay. So I'd like to invite you to go on a journey with me back to Athens. We're going all the way back to, you have to remember what year it is, the 4th century BC, so that's 2,000 plus about 500 years ago. And at this stage, direct democracy, the experiment, is in full swing. So that means everyone can go to the assembly, they can vote. The majority holds the day. It's a simple majority vote. These assemblies were pretty rough and ready. They were loud. They weren't particularly like polite. But your ability to influence people was really important. Come on, buddy. So around this time, you have this academic catfight going on, and it's mostly like loudly known between this well-known philosopher, Plato, obviously everyone knew him, and this group of philosophers called the Sophists. And basically, he's not happy with the Sophists because he thinks that they're focusing on shallow means of engaging people and persuading them. So he's like, they're all fire and fury and no substance, right? And he's worried because people make rash and maybe not great decisions based on that. And I think Trump is a great example of that, right? Like people making decisions based on fury and no substance. And also quietly, he lost his mentor to a decision at the Athenian democracy. So they killed Sophocles for like a stupid reason because everyone was shitty on the day. Like it was one of those terrible decisions that you can't take back. And so he was like doubly uncomfortable with this whole democracy thing. But that said, it was happening. So his argument was like Sophists, or my metaphor rather, is that Sophists could almost be considered the dark pattern designers of their day. So like they're leading people down the garden path somewhere where they really shouldn't go, like murdering someone really well known because they pissed off the group. So, you know, hopefully we don't do that in stand-up these days, but you know, like we still make lots of bad decisions because we have this weird groupthink going on. Double click. I'm really not having fun with this pointy thing. Maybe I should just use the mouse. So Plato says, I know, maybe it is. I probably just jinxed it, but I'm just going to put it down. So Plato says, in politics, we presume that everyone knows how to get votes, knows how to administer a city or state. But when we're ill, we do not ask for the most eloquent physician or the handsomest one. So his takedown is like, obviously, just because you know how to speak and how to get people to agree with you doesn't mean you're good at the thing you're trying to do. And so, of course, all the Greeks were like, sick burn, Plato. So then along comes this young philosopher named Aristotle, and he's also Plato's student, and they have this long and rich academic history together and debate. And Aristotle, he kind of takes on board his mentor's point of view. He's like, yeah, I get what you're saying about these Sophists and about this whole idea of persuading people in public in general. Like, I see what you're worried about, but I actually think it's really important that we talk about it and we learn how to do it well. And his reason for that is that rhetoric is useful because like his whole debate is essentially that a thing which is good is inherently better than a thing which is bad. So if you can argue for a thing which is bad and convince people to do it, it's the fault of the argument, it's the fault of the persuasion, and not the fault of the inherent thing itself. So he's like, it's important that we learn about how to talk about things. This is very much about influencing, right? This is like influencing but different vocabulary. But he thinks it's really important that we do like take on board these skill sets and we don't kind of shun it as being like too crude or too shallow, because he thinks it's really important that we can talk to groups of people and convince them to do things, essentially. So, of course, the Greeks were like, damn, sick or burn, Aristotle. Sorry, I just did this talk for the gifts, right? That's like all I really wanted. So you guys are like, yeah, cool, Laura, nice story, right? Good story, bro, but like, what does this have to do with UI? It's a great story, great question. So, basically, my argument is that this is all about scalability, that when Plato, Aristotle, and like all of these people at Athenian democracy, when they were trying to convince people to do what they wanted, they were talking to a room of people trying to scalably like have the argument, right? Like I don't want to have to tell everybody the same thing over and over again, although maybe if we believe Josh, that's the right thing to do. But like hopefully at some point our arguments scale, right? We can like say something, people can hear it, and you don't have to tell it to them one at a time. And I'd argue that we have lots and lots of ways that we do this in interfaces today. So when you think of scaling, what else does it make you think of? It's like it's automating discussions, it's automating conversations. That sounds like a form. Sounds like interaction design, right? So it looks like things like this, chatbots, or Internet of Things when we're talking to Siri and we're asking her to do something and she's telling us something. Or it could be Google Home or all the nesty like smart devices for your home. It could be things like Book Depository where you buy stuff and then it says based on stuff you like, other people liked this. So it's recommendations, right? It's people like suggesting things to you. It could be things like the place I work, which is Clover, where you try and get some financial advice scalably. So we literally like talk pretty much every day about how we're trying to scale the process of having a conversation with like a good financial advisor. And that's really what we're trying to do. Like, how do you make that experience, which is good, scalable? Or something like WebMD where you're going like, I have bumps and lumps and I've got a cough. What is that? Like it's scaling a conversation with your doctor, right? So I would argue that if you broaden the idea of conversion to like any kind of engagement, then basically anywhere where you have a conversion metric, you have rhetoric. So conversational UI, I argue that it is a bit meh. It's had a lot of hype. It's had a lot of, sorry, I also really obsessed with Parks and Rec. So as I said, lots of stupid gifts. Just quickly, there's been a lot of backlash against it recently. Facebook kind of rolled back a lot of its funding support, I think around February this year. Basically, they were saying a lot of failure rates for like successful parsing of language and successful like feedback of the right message to the right query and that kind of thing. And there's been so many instances, like since the 70s, where we've been like, we're going to have computers that talk to us. And then we're like, oh, maybe in another 10 years. So I feel like that's kind of this experience that we've gone through phases of feeling. And I'd like to argue that we don't really even need machine learning and AI to make better conversational interfaces. Like, we just need to think about it differently, maybe a little bit more creatively. So I'd like to pitch, like this is the thesis of my talk, is that we can steal/invent heuristics from the ideas in rhetoric. So let me just talk you through them, and I'll give you examples as I go, and this will start to feel like less weird and abstract and more like a thing that you can actually think about how it applies to interfaces today. So rhetoric based on the Aristotelian, I don't know how to say that, book is three things: logos, pathos, and ethos. So what are these? Logos is the use of logical claims. It is not pure mathematical logic, and I will like make the sort of clear distinction that it is very much about inference and about like having discussions, and it is not about like perfect logical proofs. So there is a place for that, but that happened way after the Greeks were around, so just not to be confused with like pure maths. So you could think of it as the Spock appeal. Oh, sorry, I just realized I had that top now there. Cool. So there's a lot of detail in this. If you're curious, I encourage you to go look, but it's things like cause and consequence, like if I don't know, if I get in the shower, I will get wet. That's what's going to happen. Syllogism is a fairly well-known one. It's basically like trying to take general instances and then say, because this happens in the general instance, I'm going to say it happens in this particular one. So I actually do have an example here. So I asked Siri, why did the chicken cross the road? And she says, maybe the chicken is standing still and it is the road that crosses under it. So this is like, she's like kind of being a bit cheeky here, but what she's doing is like reversing the syllogism. So the assumption that I've made, like the general assumption is that like the road is still and the chicken is crossing across it. And she's like, well, maybe your perception is wrong. And it's actually the road crossing over the chicken. So she's, you know, like it's a stupid joke, but like the point is that she's referencing a thing that's existed in our concept of language for many thousands of years. So pathos. Pathos is the use of emotion to evoke like excitement and ownership in your audience. So it's you know, like we talked about delight a lot before, like we have a lot of language that we like to use to like sort of paste on these same ideas. But I think at its core, pathos is really, it's really about using emotion to get people to understand where you're coming from and to agree with you. So for an example, you might say something like, Internet Co. is devoted to telling our users stories and getting the world to love them as much as we do. So like what's going on there under the hood is that we're saying, hey, we love our users and look at how great we are at supporting them and look at how great we are at broadcasting their stories. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, isn't that a cool company? So it's kind of like you're trying to appear selfless, but at the same time, you're kind of like declaring who you are and what you do. Oh, I love you, I hope you love me too, is my notes there. So some examples of the kinds of emotions we might evoke in our audience are love or fear or pity. So like Trump, again, he is a classic example, like all he does is evoke fear in people, like fear of the other, fear of, you know, economic crisis, fear of just about everything that's not him, right? But you can also use positive emotions, like unfortunately because of our stupid brains and like the little lizard brain at the back, we do respond more strongly to negative emotions. So that is usually the more effective at driving conversion, but you know, you don't have to go that route. So an example in a chatbot. Of course, I had a chatbot because I am a crazy cat lady. Now this chatbot like doesn't really have any logic behind it. There's no machine learning. It's not recognizing what I'm typing. But damn, I love it so much. It's just so cute. And like the thing that's interesting to me is like how strong the emotional reaction is that it evokes in me, right? Like it's not that it's actually doing anything smart. It's not even persuading me to do anything except keep talking to it. So yeah, anyway. Oh, this is, ooh, sorry, I keep doing this. I just want to show you like 10 seconds of this video. So this is this little bot called Kismet, and it's a burbling, non-verbal bot, and it's another good example of how, like, without language, we can evoke emotion. Have you seen it before? It's good, hey? Hang on, I'll just play it and then we'll talk about it.
I know you are. Go. Go? No, I'm not gonna go. Yay. You're so silly.
Through this unique approach, the team created a robot that is able to produce moment-to-moment and seemingly natural human responses. This enables Kismet to appear to have social intelligence.
Social intelligence was
Thanks, lady. So I'll give you the whole video later if you want to watch it. It's really fascinating. But the thing I think is great about it is like the look on that boy's face. He's just so into it. Like he thinks it's the most amazing thing. And I think that's a really good example of how we can use like emotions evoked to like create the sensation of having a conversation or interacting with something in a meaningful way. And like from there, hopefully, if we are using this in the service of a product or a tool, like from creating that emotional attachment, then you can maybe help them do something or help them get somewhere. But but you create the emotional attachment first. So ethos. Ethos is the one that we're the most familiar with, but we just don't have a label for it. It's basically using your likeness with your audience to appeal to them. So for an example, it could be showing that you're credible because you have this big background, or it could be referring to a shared cultural or like shared interest. So it could be things like, oh, we all like heavy metal, or like, I don't know, what kind of metal do you like? Something crazy. Like
progressive melodic death thrash.
Yes, progressive melodic thrash death metal. So like if we all like that, then we've appealed to a shared experience, and then that makes you more likely to agree with me or to appreciate something I have to say, like that isn't necessarily related to that kind of music. So there's two kinds. Intrinsic, which is where you're referencing these experiences. I think a really like good way of getting into this concept quickly is, hands up, who knows Joss Whedon, the scriptwriter, like, ish? Yeah. So he wrote like some of the Avengers movies and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel and all that stuff. And like his scripts are just literally peppered with pop culture references, like slam full, like Rocky Road. And like if you listen to his scripts, you're like, oh, I got that joke. Oh, that's really funny because I saw that other thing you did. And like all it is about referencing like yourself over and over and over again, but because you have someone to share that experience with, it's really like fun and engaging. And extrinsic is the kind of ethos where you're like, hey, so I have a PhD in physics, and also I've got 20 years of business experience. Actually, you wouldn't have 20 years of business experience if you have a PhD, because that would have taken you 10, but you know. But the point is, you're pointing to like these signals or these flags that we use to say, yeah, I'm good, I know what I'm doing, I've got like the experience, you should go with me. Oops. So for an example, we have this chatbot called, oh, sorry, I totally forgot about this one. Oh, sorry, this is a reference to intrinsic ethos. So this is me saying to Siri, I love you, and she says, oh, I bet you say that to all your Apple products. Like, this is a really small example, but it's actually referencing a song saying, I bet you say that to all the girls. And like, it's a thing that's so well known, it's kind of become entrenched in our cultural dialogue, but it's actually a reference to a song that now no one knows what it is or has referenced, but it's like, it doesn't matter because we know the phrase, we know what it means, right? And this is more like extrinsic ethos. So this is a chatbot that sort of has the persona of Albert Einstein. And again, like, it's not smart, it's coming from a big spreadsheet of possible pre-canned answers, right? Like, there isn't any smarts going on here, and yet I probably spent half an hour chatting to this guy, and I definitely wouldn't have chatted to just like chatbot ABC, right? So just the fact of the face and the character made me a little bit more willing to engage with it, because I kind of imbued it with this authority, even if it just really didn't mean anything. Like, even knowing like what was happening, I was still like, oh, but it's kind of cool. And there's all these cute photos of like young Albert Einstein, who was actually kind of hot. So, you know, it was fun. Okay, so that's Aristotle. I'm now just gonna like fly you through Cicero, who's the 5 Canons of Rhetoric. So like, we've got these two schools of thought. They're both like complementary, but I just wanted to like walk you through them all real fast because I think they're both really relevant to UI. So his 5 things were invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. So again, like thinking about, these are all to do with the act of speaking to a group and trying to succeed at persuading them to believe in you or believe in the thing you're advocating for. But I think these all apply really nicely to user interfaces as well. So invention is thinking creatively about how you're going to provide your argument, or in this case, content. And I think Opov is a really great example of this. He's this little chatbot that says, what side of the political spectrum do you fall on? And you tell him, and then he gives you articles and content from the other side in an attempt to break you out of your little like content bubble, like your preference bubble. So it's just like, it's not terribly smart, but what it does do is try and like give you stuff that you wouldn't expect or you might not sort of stumble across naturally from like your feeds. Arrangement is the order in which things come up. So in the UX world, we think a lot about arrangement when we think about things like, what order do the form fields go in? Or like, what order do the screens go as I'm designing this flow? Or like, how much is too much? And I think like these questions kind of come up in interface design all the time. And I didn't come up with a great example for it, so I'm just gonna sort of gloss over and keep running because I want to get to the other ones that are much more fun. So style is about expressing your ideas in a way that has flourish. It could be maybe what the Sophists were being criticized for, which is, like all flair and no substance. But I think this chatbot is a really great example of like a good use of style. And like, to be fair, it's also kind of about intrinsic ethos. So we have this character, he's Bus Uncle, and he's in Singapore and he's using this like Singlish, like Sinhalese English Creole to talk to the users. And he's just totally cheeky as fuck, right? Like, he's so naughty. Like, the other day, he messaged me, he was like, you forget me already, La. And I was like, what, man? You're a chatbot. And maybe that's not very respectful to be, like, up in my face, because I don't really need buses in Singapore. I was just playing with the app to see what it was about. But, like, he has all these little, like, extra words and funny little things. Like, you can tickle him. So you ask him, hey, where am I? What do I want to do? And he's like, oh, I can't find it. Ha, 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 ha. And then you're like, if you tickle him, then he'll tell you where the stop is. So you have to have these little extra interactions to actually like get your knowledge. Memory is your ability to recall. So I haven't actually done a very good job of that tonight. I keep forgetting what I've got on my notes. But it's when you're good at it, it's what you do when you can just like, come up with stuff off the top of your head. And I think it's interesting to think about in interface design, and I actually think the inverse is really interesting as well, because it's not just what you remember about your interactions, but what you agree to forget, right? It's about privacy. It's about agreeing that I'm not going to save your shopping history forever and sell it on to like the highest bidder. It's about agreeing that the terms of the interaction can be dictated by the user as well as not just the interface. So I think memory and thinking about memory is not just like a thing that's hard for us to do, but it's actually really easy for computers, right? Like computers can store everything forever potentially. So we have to think about what's the right amount of things to remember and what's polite, what's kind even. So I thought this was a funny example. Sarah used to have an answer to this. If you asked her, what's the best way to get rid of a body? I think she used to say something like, you go out to the woods and you dig a big hole, and now she's like very politic and just like, oh, I used to know the answer to this, but I'm not going to tell you anymore. So yeah, deciding what details you don't want to be stored is a thing that we have to get more serious about, I think, as our lives become more and more digitized. And this is what I'm really passionate about, so I'll stop rabbiting on. So delivery is about the tone and the speed and the inflection. This is really interesting to think about when we think about chatbots, because right now everything is automated and it's all at the same speed and it's really flat and fucking boring, right? Like, we hate it. It's just, we need more articulation. We need the ability to pause. We need to not deliver 4 sentences at the same speed that we deliver 2 words. And right now that's all we do. I know that we're very much kind of constrained by these development environments that we work within for like Facebook Messenger or Slackbot or whatever. And like, we can't really necessarily as individuals like change the paradigm, but like we can at least advocate for it or think about what it might look like if we were to start to get inflection. So some examples.
Okay, Google, why is the sky blue?
According to UCR Math Department, a clear cloudless daytime sky is blue because molecules in the air scatter blue light from the sun more than they scatter red light.
Clear cloudless daytime sky is not how anybody speaks to anybody else in the real world. I just like literally got into my audio editor and tried to edit what I thought would be like a slightly less sucky version of that answer.
According to UCR Math Department, a clear, cloudless daytime sky is blue because molecules in the air scatter blue light from the sun more than they scatter red light.
So it's got all the same issues of like the tone and the actual sounds of her voice, but just a couple of pauses help with the delivery so much. And like obviously this is a huge domain, and I won't try and pretend that I'm covering it well, but just some sort of thought starters. So to circle back to Aristotle, it was pretty funny. Like at the end of his career, he was really he felt really guilty about basically like having done this to his mentor. And he was like, how can a man who for the significant phase of his formation, having shared his master's opposition to rhetoric, have in maturity composed a masterpiece of the formal study of rhetoric? And I think I understand his anxiety, but I think it's something that we could think of in interaction design as both a challenge and an opportunity. Because what he was dealing with was the need to like scalably talk to the masses. We have that already. Like we're doing that all day, every day when we build apps and talk to people. But one of the constraints that we're constantly faced with is like not having conversations that can go deeper or can respond more specifically to the desires and the interests of the user until we get to conversational UI. And when we're there, that conversation can keep going as long as that person is interested and keeps asking questions. So I think it's a thing that we could start thinking about not just as something that's difficult, but something that could really revolutionize how deep and how meaningful these interactions could get. So if you take away one thing, I hope I've convinced you that we actually all are rhetors already, and that it exists everywhere in our marketing and in our interface design, and even when you're convincing your fellow programmers to install a Slack plugin. I have some recommended reading. I'll tweet these around, but there's some really great books out there if you're curious about this domain at all. I particularly recommend Worlds Like Loaded Pistols. It's just super easy reading, and it's really thoughtful, and I think it's really nice to like go outside our domain a little bit so that we have new eyes to come back and think about it again. So to conclude, Aristotle said, "It is absurd to hold that a man should be ashamed of an inability to defend himself with his limbs, but not ashamed of an inability to defend himself with speech and reason. For the use of rational speech is more distinctive of the human being than the use of his limbs." Well, I argue that it won't be very long before we're saying it's absurd to hold that an interface should be ashamed of its inability to communicate through shapes and colors, but not ashamed of its inability to communicate with speech and reason. For the use of rational speech is more distinctive of a great user experience than the use of its icons. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Hit back!